Everyone believed the billionaire was broken. But the only person who saw the truth was the one they treated like she didn't matter. In a mansion filled with wealth, power, and perfect lies, Daniel Carter pretended to lose everything: his strength, his voice, his control. It was a test, a dangerous one. And one by one, the people closest to him revealed who they really were. But while others plotted, betrayed, and waited for his downfall, one quiet housekeeper chose something different. She didn't fall for the illusion. She didn't chase the money. She stayed kind, when it would have been easier not to. Rain slid down the tall glass windows like slow tears, distorting the view of the sprawling Beverly Hills skyline beyond. Inside the Carter estate, everything gleamed: polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, with walls lined with art that cost more than most homes. It was a place built to impress, to intimidate, to remind anyone who stepped inside exactly how far beneath its owners they stood. And yet, in the center of it all, sat a man who could not move. Daniel Carter, once one of the most powerful real estate magnates on the West Coast, rested in a custom-built wheelchair near the grand staircase. His body was still, wrapped in a soft gray blanket, his head slightly tilted as if he were caught somewhere between sleep and silence. The accident had been all over the news: private jet, engine failure, emergency landing, miraculous survival, followed by paralysis. That was the story the world believed. Across from him stood Vanessa Carter. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine: perfect hair, flawless makeup, as a silk robe draped effortlessly over her shoulders. But there was nothing soft in her expression. Her arms were crossed tightly, her manicured fingers tapping against her forearm as she stared down at her husband. "You're just sitting there again," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the quiet room. "Do you even understand what this is doing to me?" Daniel didn't respond. Of course he didn't. Vanessa let out a cold laugh, pacing slowly across the marble floor. Her heels clicked with precision, each step echoing through the high-ceilinged space like a ticking clock. "I married a man who ran a billion-dollar empire," she continued, stopping directly in front of him. "Not this." Her gaze swept over him, dismissive, almost disgusted. "A body that just takes up space." Still, Daniel didn't move, not a muscle. From the far side of the room, a quiet presence approached. Angela Brooks moved carefully, almost silently, as if she had learned long ago how to exist without drawing attention. She carried a small basin of warm water and a clean cloth, her steps steady despite the tension in the air. She didn't look at Vanessa. She didn't need to. She had heard enough. Angela knelt beside Daniel, her movements gentle, practiced. She dipped the cloth into the water, wrung it out, and carefully lifted his hand. His skin was warm, his fingers relaxed. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that didn't belong in a house like this. "Let's get you comfortable." Vanessa turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. "Don't get too comfortable," she snapped, her tone dripping with disdain. "Oh, you're just staff." Angela didn't react. Not outwardly. But something in her chest tightened. Something old, familiar. The same feeling she'd carried since she was a little girl standing outside a store window, while other kids were allowed inside. The same feeling she felt every time someone looked at her and decided who she was before she even spoke. She kept her focus on Daniel. Carefully, she wiped his hand, her touch steady and respectful. Not rushed, not careless. As if what she was doing mattered. As if he mattered. "Your tea is ready," she added quietly. "Chamomile, just like yesterday." Vanessa scoffed. "He can't even taste it," she said, grabbing her phone from the table. "You're wasting time." Angela placed Daniel's hand gently back onto the blanket. "Everyone deserves to be treated with care," she replied, her tone calm but firm. The room went still. Vanessa slowly lowered her phone, her eyes locking onto Angela with something sharper now, something more dangerous. "You think this is about care?" she asked, stepping closer. "This is about reality. He's not coming back, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life pretending otherwise." Angela stood up slowly, meeting Vanessa's gaze for just a second. Not defiant, not submissive, just steady. "He's still here," she said. Vanessa let out a short, humorless laugh. "Barely." She turned away, waving a dismissive hand as she walked toward the staircase. "And don't forget your place," she added over her shoulder. "People like you don't get opinions in this house." The words hung in the air long after she disappeared upstairs. Silence returned. Heavy. Thick. Angela exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction. She reached for the teacup on the side table and carefully lifted it. "I know you can't say anything," she murmured, bringing the cup closer to Daniel's lips, supporting his head just enough. "But I'll keep talking anyway." She paused, watching his face. No movement. No reaction. Still, she continued. "My grandma used to say, people don't stop needing kindness just because life gets hard." She adjusted the blanket around his shoulders, smoothing it out with care. "And I guess I believe that." Outside, thunder rolled softly across the hills. For a moment, it was just the sound of rain, the quiet hum of the house and Angela's presence beside him. Then, something shifted. So small it could have been missed. Daniel's eyes, not wide, not obvious, but focused, watching, not just the room, not just the ceiling. Angela. Every movement, every word. Behind the stillness, behind the silence, something was awake. Something calculating, waiting. And as Angela turned away to set the cup back down, she didn't see the faintest tightening of his jaw, or the storm quietly building behind his unmoving eyes. This wasn't the end of a man's life. It was the beginning of something else. Something no one in that house was ready for, especially the one person who had just been told she didn't matter at all. Because in a house full of glass, power, and illusion, only one person was real, and the test had already begun. By the time Angela Brooks stepped off the bus, the rain had softened into a cold mist that clung to the air like something unfinished. South Central Los Angeles didn't shine the way Beverly Hills did. There were no polished marble floors here, no quiet halls echoing with wealth, just cracked sidewalks, flickering streetlights, and the distant hum of traffic rolling past like a restless tide. Angela pulled her coat tighter around herself as she walked down the narrow block toward her apartment. The building leaned slightly to one side, like it had been standing too long without anyone really caring. A broken neon sign buzzed above the corner liquor store, casting a tired glow across the pavement. Inside, her apartment was small but clean. A single couch, a chipped wooden table, and a narrow kitchen that barely fit one person at a time. The scent of rice and spices still lingered faintly in the air from the night before. "Angie?" The voice came from the back room. Her younger brother, Marcus, stepped out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He wore a faded college hoodie, the logo barely visible after too many washes. "You're late," he said, glancing at the clock. Angela smiled softly, setting her bag down by the door. "Long day?" she replied. "Go back to sleep. You've got class in the morning." Marcus leaned against the doorway, studying her face. "You okay?" She paused just for a second. That question, simple, honest, always landed harder than anything else. Yeah, she said finally. I'm good. But Marcus didn't move. You sure? He pressed. You look tired. Angela let out a quiet breath, slipping off her shoes. I am tired, she admitted. That's all. It wasn't all, but it was enough. Marcus nodded slowly, accepting the answer even if he didn't believe it. Oh, you didn't have to take the night shift at the shelter, he said. You're already working at that mansion all day. Angela walked into the kitchen, opening the fridge. Inside were a few containers neatly stacked, nothing fancy, but enough. I know, she said, but it helps. Every extra hour counts. For me, Marcus said quietly. Angela glanced at him, her expression softening. For us, she corrected. He looked away, guilt flickering across his face. I'll get a job, he muttered. I can cut back on classes. No, Angela said, firm but gentle. You're finishing school, that's the deal. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. They had had this conversation before, too many times. Angela reached for a small container and handed it to him. Eat, she said. You've got a long day tomorrow. He took it, but his eyes lingered on her. You always do this, he said quietly. Take care of everyone else. Angela shrugged, leaning against the counter. Someone has to. Marcus shook his head, half smiling. Yeah, he said. Guess that's you. Later that night, after Marcus had gone back to bed, Angela stood alone in the kitchen. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint buzz of the old refrigerator. She pulled out a small bag of groceries, fresh herbs, chicken, a few vegetables. Not much, but enough to make something warm, something real. She moved with practiced ease, chopping, stirring, seasoning. The rhythm of it calmed her, grounding her in something steady, something she could control. As the soup simmered, she leaned against the counter, her mind drifting. Back to the mansion, to Vanessa's voice. People like you. Angela closed her eyes briefly. She had heard those words before. Different voices, different places, same meaning. Not enough, not wanted, not equal. She opened her eyes and looked at the pot in front of her. Then she reached for another container. This one she filled carefully, neatly, thoughtfully. For Daniel. She didn't have to. No one had asked her to. He probably wouldn't even know. But that didn't matter. She sealed the lid and set it aside. Everyone deserves to be treated like they matter, she whispered, echoing her own words from earlier. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, then faded. Morning came too quickly. The bus ride back to Beverly Hills felt like crossing into another world. The streets grew cleaner, the buildings taller, the air somehow quieter, and Angela stepped off the bus, adjusting her uniform before walking up the long driveway of the Carter estate. The gates opened automatically. Inside, everything was exactly as she had left it. Perfect, untouched, unreal. She entered through the side door, as she always did. Not the front, never the front. In the kitchen, the staff moved quietly, each person focused on their tasks. No one spoke much. It was that kind of house. Angela placed her bag down and pulled out the container she had prepared. "Morning," said Rosa, one of the other staff members, glancing at her. "Morning," Angela replied. Rosa nodded toward the container. "For him?" Angela nodded. Rosa hesitated. "You don't have to do that, you know," she said softly. "He's not even aware." Angela smiled faintly. "Maybe," she said. "But I am." Rosa didn't argue, and she just gave a small nod and went back to her work. Angela picked up the container and headed toward the main hall. As she walked, She could already hear Vanessa's voice echoing faintly from upstairs. Sharp, controlled, impatient. Angela slowed slightly, taking a breath before stepping into the room. Daniel was exactly where she had left him. Still, silent, watching. She approached him, setting the container down on the side table. "I brought you something," she said gently. "Made it fresh." She opened the lid, letting the warmth rise into the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, just for a second, Daniel's eyes shifted. Barely. But enough. Angela paused. Her hand hovered in the air. Did she imagine it? No, she had seen it. Something flickered behind his stillness. Something alive. Her heart skipped, but she said nothing. Did nothing. Instead, she simply picked up the spoon and sat down beside him. "Let's try a little," she said, as if everything was normal. As if she hadn't just glimpsed the edge of a truth no one else in that house seemed to notice. And as she lifted the spoon toward him, her expression remained calm. But inside, a quiet question had begun to form. One she wasn't ready to ask. Not yet. Because if she was right, then nothing in this house was what it seemed. And she wasn't the only one watching. Not anymore. By late afternoon, the Carter estate had transformed. The quiet stillness of the morning was gone, replaced by soft jazz drifting through hidden speakers and the low hum of conversation. Staff moved quickly, adjusting centerpieces, polishing glassware, aligning silver trays with practiced precision. Every detail mattered. Every surface had to reflect perfection. Because tonight, Vanessa Carter was hosting. Angela stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, taking it all in. Crystal glasses caught the light like tiny stars. Catered dishes lined the marble counters. Things with names she couldn't pronounce but had learned to prepare anyway. "Back entrance only," came Vanessa's voice from across the room. Angela didn't need to look up to know it was directed at her. Vanessa stepped into the kitchen, dressed in a sleek black evening gown that shimmered with every movement. Her presence filled the space, not warm, not welcoming, but commanding. "We have guests arriving in 30 minutes, she said, scanning the room. "Everyone needs to stay out of sight unless you're serving. I don't want any distractions." Her eyes landed briefly on Angela, just long enough. Angela gave a small nod. "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa turned away without another word, already focused on something else. Someone else. Angela picked up a tray, steadying it in her hands. "Same rules," Rosa murmured beside her. "Smile, serve, disappear." Angela gave a faint smile. "Got it." The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow through the tall windows. One by one, luxury cars rolled up the driveway, their headlights sweeping across the front of the house like silent announcements. Guests arrived dressed in silk and tailored suits, their laughter light, effortless. They spoke in low voices about markets, investments, properties, things that felt distant from Angela's world, like conversations happening on another planet. Now, she moved through the room carefully, offering drinks, collecting empty glasses, always staying just outside the center of attention. Invisible. That was the goal. That was the expectation. As she passed by a group near the grand piano, she caught fragments of conversation. "Such a tragic accident. He was unstoppable before this. I heard he can't even speak now." Angela's grip tightened slightly on the tray. They were talking about Daniel. Like he wasn't even in the house. Like he wasn't still here. She glanced toward the far side of the room. Daniel sat near the window, positioned carefully as part of the scene. His wheelchair angled just right, his blanket perfectly arranged. From a distance, he looked almost like a prop, something placed there to complete the picture. But Angela knew better. She had seen that flicker, that movement, that awareness. And as she watched him now, something inside her shifted. He wasn't gone. Not completely. "Watch where you're going," the sharp voice snapped her back. Angela turned quickly, nearly colliding with a woman in a glittering silver dress. The woman looked her up and down, her expression tightening. "Careful," she said, brushing an imaginary speck from her sleeve. "Some of us are wearing things that cost more than your entire paycheck." Angela lowered her gaze slightly. "I'm sorry," she said calmly. The woman smirked, turning back to her group. "They really should train the staff better," she added, loud enough for others to hear. "Or at least, choose more presentable ones." A few soft laughs followed. Angela felt the heat rise in her chest, but she didn't respond. It didn't react. She adjusted the tray and kept moving, because that was the rule. Smile, serve, disappear. Near the staircase, another guest leaned in toward Vanessa. "I have to ask," the woman said, her voice laced with curiosity. "How are you handling everything? It must be difficult." Vanessa sighed softly, placing a hand over her chest. "It's been a transition," she replied, her tone perfectly measured. "But I'm doing what I can." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Daniel. "Life doesn't stop," she added. "We adapt." The woman nodded sympathetically. "You're so strong." Angela watched from across the room. Strong. That wasn't the word she would have used. A sudden commotion broke the rhythm. "Vanessa!" One of the guests hurried over, her face tight with concern. "My bracelet. It's gone. It was right here." She held out her wrist, bare now except for a faint indentation where the jewelry had been. The room shifted. Conversations paused. Eyes turned. Vanessa's expression sharpened instantly. "When did you last see it?" she asked. "Just a few minutes ago," the woman replied. "I took it off near the bar." Vanessa's gaze swept the room. Then, inevitably, it landed on the staff, on Angela. The air changed, subtle but unmistakable. "Everyone stay where you are," Vanessa said, her voice calm but firm. "We'll sort this out quickly." Angela stood still, her heart beginning to pound. She had done nothing wrong, but that didn't always matter. Vanessa stepped closer, her eyes locked onto Angela now. "You were near the bar," she said. It wasn't a question. Angela met her gaze. "Yes, ma'am," she replied evenly. I was serving drinks." Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "Did you see the bracelet?" "No, ma'am." A pause. Too long, too heavy. "Of course not," Vanessa said softly. "Why would you?" The words sounded polite, but the meaning underneath them was anything but. Angela felt every eye in the room on her, judging, deciding, without evidence, without truth, just assumption. Daniel watched it all, from his place by the window. Still, silent. But inside something tightened. Angela stood her ground. Not defensive, not angry, just steady. "I didn't take it," she said. Her voice didn't rise, didn't shake. It didn't need to. Vanessa's lips curved into a thin smile. "I didn't say you did," she replied. But she didn't look away, didn't release the tension, didn't clear the doubt, because doubt was enough, and sometimes it was all it took. The room remained quiet, waiting, watching. And for a moment, it felt like the truth didn't matter at all. Only perception, only power, only who people believed. Angela lowered her hands slowly, placing the tray down on a nearby table. She didn't plead, didn't argue. She simply stood there, present, real, in a room full of glass, wealth, and carefully constructed illusions. And somewhere behind her, Daniel's gaze never left her, because in that moment, more than anything else, he was learning exactly who she was and who everyone else wasn't. The party ended the way all expensive nights did, quietly. No one mentioned the missing bracelet again. It had been found, Vanessa announced, somewhere vague, somewhere convenient. Laughter resumed, glasses clinked, and the tension dissolved as if it had never existed. But something had changed. Not in the room, in Daniel. Hours later, the mansion returned to silence. The last car pulled away. The gates closed. The lights dimmed. Only the soft glow of hallway sconces remained, casting long shadows across polished floors. Upstairs, Daniel sat in the same position. Still. Silent. Alone. Vanessa hadn't come back. She hadn't checked on him once after the guests left. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed. Her footsteps faded. Then nothing. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that felt heavy. Daniel's eyes shifted slightly toward the doorway. Waiting. Listening. Nothing. Minutes passed. Then more. The pain came slowly at first. A dull ache spreading across his chest, tightening with each breath. It wasn't part of the act, not entirely. Oh, the accident had been real enough to leave its mark. His fingers twitched beneath the blanket. Just once. Then stilled again. He clenched his jaw, holding the expression. Weak. Distant. Broken. Because the test wasn't over. Not yet. But the pain grew sharper. His breathing became uneven, shallow. A quiet strain he couldn't completely hide. Still. No one came. Downstairs, the kitchen lights flickered back on. Angela stood by the sink, sleeves rolled up, carefully rinsing the last of the glassware. The house was quiet now, but her work wasn't finished. It never really was. Rosa had already left. The other staff gone hours ago. Angela stayed. She always stayed a little longer. Not because she had to, because something in her didn't feel right leaving too soon. She dried her hands slowly, glancing toward the hallway. But something tugged at her. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it. A quiet unease. Angela grabbed her bag, then paused. Listened. The house was still. Too still. Her eyes moved toward the staircase, then back to the kitchen door. Then again. Upstairs. She exhaled softly. You're probably tired, she murmured to herself. But her feet were already moving. Up the stairs, slow, careful, not wanting to disturb, but unable to ignore the feeling. When she reached the top, the hallway stretched out in silence. The soft carpet muffled her steps. Daniel's door was slightly open. A thin line of light spilled into the hallway. Angela hesitated, then knocked gently. No answer. She pushed the door open just a little. "Mr. Carter?" she called softly. Still no response. She stepped inside and froze. Daniel's head had tilted slightly to the side, his breathing uneven now, barely controlled. The blanket had slipped just enough to reveal the tension in his body. Not still, not calm. Something was wrong. Angela moved quickly, not panicked, focused. She set her bag down and crossed the room, her movements steady but urgent. "I'm here," she said softly, kneeling beside him. No response. But his eyes shifted, just slightly. She saw it, and something in her chest tightened. "You're in pain, aren't you?" she whispered. She didn't wait for confirmation, didn't need it. Angela reached for the small cabinet beside the bed, opening it with practiced familiarity. She had memorized where everything was: medication, water, clean cloths, because no one else had. She poured a glass of water, careful not to spill, and then she turned back, supporting his head gently as she brought the glass to his lips. "Slow," she said, her voice calm, grounded. He drank. Just enough. She set the glass aside and reached for a cloth, dipping it in warm water from the nearby basin. Then she wrung it out and pressed it lightly against his hands. Warmth. Real human. "Easy," she murmured. "You're okay." Daniel's eyes closed. Not in weakness, in something else. Relief. Angela adjusted the blanket around him, smoothing it carefully. She checked the position of his legs, the angle of the wheelchair, every detail that could ease the strain. Movements no one had taught her. Things she had simply learned. Because she cared. She pulled a chair closer and sat beside him. The room felt different now, not empty, not cold. But she reached into her bag and pulled out a small container. "Made this earlier," she said quietly. "Didn't think you'd eat, but I brought it anyway." She opened it, the faint smell of homemade soup filling the air. Simple, warm, real. She set it aside for later, knowing he might not be able to eat now. But it mattered that she had brought it. Angela leaned back slightly, watching him. "You know," she said after a moment, her voice soft, almost conversational, "my grandma used to say, people don't show who they are when things are easy." She glanced at him. "They show it when nobody's watching." A pause. The clock ticked softly on the wall. "I don't know if you can hear me," she added, "but I hope you can feel that you're not alone." Her words hung in the air. Simple, honest. She didn't expect anything back, or didn't wait for a reaction. She just stayed. Minutes turned into an hour, then more. Angela adjusted his position again when his breathing shifted. She wiped his forehead when it dampened. She checked his pulse the way she'd seen nurses do. Careful, gentle, present. At some point, she picked up a book from the side table. Not because he asked, because she thought maybe it would help. She began to read, her voice low, steady, filling the quiet space with something warm. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed. Lights flickered in distant buildings. But inside that room, time slowed. Daniel didn't move, didn't reveal anything. But inside, everything was changing. Because this wasn't performance. This wasn't obligation. This wasn't for show. No cameras, no audience, no reward. Just kindness, real kindness, the kind that didn't need to be seen to exist. And as Angela's voice continued, soft and steady in the dim light, a single tear slipped quietly from the corner of Daniel's eye. She didn't notice, didn't react. She simply turned the page and kept reading. Because to her, it wasn't about being seen. It was about being there. And for the first time since the accident, Daniel wasn't alone. Morning came quietly. Soft sunlight spilled through the tall windows, stretching across the marble floors like liquid gold. The mansion looked peaceful again, untouched by the tension of the night before. But beneath that calm surface, something darker had begun to move. Angela stepped through the front gate just after sunrise, her shoes still slightly damp from the early morning mist. She carried a small paper bag in her hand, the scent of fresh biscuits and eggs faintly escaping from inside. She paused for a moment before entering. Just a second, like she needed to gather herself. Then she stepped in. Inside, the house was already awake, but not alive. Voices echoed faintly from down the hall. Low, sharp, controlled. Angela slowed her steps. She wasn't trying to listen, but she couldn't help it. "We don't have much time." It was Vanessa. Angela stopped just short of the corner, her body still, her breath quiet. Another voice responded. Male, smooth, familiar. Mark Reynolds, Daniel's business partner. "You said the doctors confirmed it," Mark continued. "No recovery, no movement, no risk." Angela's fingers tightened slightly around the paper bag. Vanessa let out a short laugh. There's no risk," she said. "He's exactly where we need him to be." A pause. Then, "What about the signatures?" Angela's heart skipped. Mark's voice dropped lower. "That's the only thing standing between us and everything he built." Angela leaned ever so slightly toward the wall, not stepping out, not revealing herself, just listening. Vanessa exhaled slowly. "I've already spoken to the lawyer," she said. "Power of attorney, asset control, full transfer if necessary. Once it's signed—" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Mark did. "We own it all." Silence followed. Heavy, calculated. Angela felt a chill move down her spine. This wasn't just frustration. This wasn't just resentment. This was something else. Something planned. Something deliberate. "And if he refuses?" Mark asked. But Vanessa's tone didn't change. "He won't." A beat. Then softer. "He doesn't have a choice." Angela stepped back slowly, careful not to make a sound, careful not to be seen. Her mind raced. She looked down at the bag in her hand, then back toward the hallway. Then, upstairs, to Daniel. She swallowed hard, then kept walking, as if she had heard nothing, as if everything was normal. By the time she reached Daniel's room, her heart was still pounding, but her face was calm, steady, the way it always was. She knocked lightly, then stepped inside. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said gently. Daniel sat in the same position, still, quiet. But something in his eyes shifted when she entered, just slightly. Angela noticed. She always noticed. "I brought breakfast," she added, placing the bag down carefully. When she moved around the room, opening the curtains just enough to let in light, but not too much. Then she turned back to him. For a moment, she hesitated. The conversation downstairs echoed in her mind. The words, the tone, the plan. She looked at him, really looked, and something inside her changed. "You're not as alone as they think," she said softly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it meant something, even if he couldn't respond. Angela unpacked the food, placing it neatly on a tray. She adjusted his blanket, checked his position, same as always. But now, there was something else behind her movements. Awareness, concern, quiet urgency. As she leaned closer to help him sit slightly upright, she lowered her voice. "They're planning something," she whispered. Her hands didn't stop moving, and her expression didn't change, but her voice, different. "They think you can't hear them," she continued. "They think you don't know." She paused, just for a second. "I don't know how much you understand, but I need you to be careful." Daniel's eyes flickered, barely, but enough. Angela saw it, and her breath caught. For the first time, she knew, not guessed, Not suspected. Knew. He wasn't gone. Not completely. She straightened slowly, stepped back, her mind racing now in a different direction. Everything she had seen, everything she had felt. It wasn't imagination. It was real. Angela looked at him again. This time, not as a patient, not as someone broken, but as someone watching, testing, waiting. Her voice dropped even lower. "I won't say anything," she said quietly. "A promise, not a question, not a demand, a choice." Daniel's fingers twitched beneath the blanket. So small, so controlled. But she saw it, and she didn't react. Didn't gasp. Didn't step back. She simply nodded. Once. Then turned away. Because now, she understood her role. Not just to care, but to protect. Downstairs, laughter echoed again. Vanessa and Mark had moved on from their conversation, their voices now light, casual, as if nothing had been said at all. But Angela knew better, and so did Daniel. The house looked the same, sounded the same, felt the same, but something had shifted, something quiet, something dangerous, something that couldn't be undone. Angela picked up the tray again, her hands steady, her eyes calm, but her heart alert. Because now, she wasn't just helping. She was part of something much bigger, and neither of them were alone anymore. The air in the mansion felt different that evening. Not louder, not busier, just tighter. Like something invisible had wrapped itself around the walls, pulling everything inward. Angela felt it the moment she stepped through the door. Even the light seemed colder. Vanessa stood near the staircase, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and sharp. "I don't care how it looks," she said. "Just have the documents ready by tomorrow morning." She ended the call without waiting for a response. Then she saw Angela. For a second, neither of them spoke. Angela offered a small nod. "Good evening, ma'am." Vanessa didn't return it. Her eyes lingered. Too long. Too focused. "You were upstairs this morning," Vanessa said. It wasn't a question. Angela kept her posture steady. "Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Carter needed assistance." Vanessa stepped closer, heels clicking against the marble. "And did he say anything?" she asked, her tone almost casual. Angela shook her head. "No, ma'am." A pause. Vanessa studied her face, searching, measuring, then a smile, thin, cold. "Of course not," she said. "That would require him to be capable." Angela didn't react, didn't look away, just stood there. Vanessa's smile faded. "Go finish your work," she added, turning away, "and try to stay where you belong." Angela walked past her without another word, but her heartbeat had already begun to rise. Something wasn't right. Not just the tension, not just the plan she had overheard. Something else. Something closer. Upstairs, Daniel sat exactly as before, but his eyes shifted the moment Angela entered. He knew. Oh, not everything, but enough. Angela closed the door softly behind her, then moved quickly. Not rushed, but deliberate. "I think she suspects something," she said under her breath, adjusting the blanket. Her hands worked automatically, but her voice carried urgency. "She asked questions about you." Daniel remained still, but inside, everything sharpened. Angela leaned closer. "We have to be careful," she whispered. Her eyes met his. For a moment, there was no pretending. No act. Just two people who understood something no one else in that house did. Angela straightened, returning to her usual calm, but her senses stayed alert. Every sound, every movement, every shift in the house. And then, it happened. A voice echoed from downstairs. "Angela!" Sharp, commanding. "Vanessa." Angela froze for half a second, then turned. "I'll be right back," she murmured softly. She stepped out into the hallway. The sound of her footsteps faded down the stairs. Daniel's eyes followed the door long after she disappeared. Minutes passed. Then, raised voices. Not loud, but intense. Angela stood in the center of the living room. Vanessa faced her, arms crossed, expression hard. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Vanessa said slowly. "Were you listening to my conversation this morning?" Angela's chest tightened, but her voice stayed even. "No, ma'am." Vanessa stepped closer. "Because it would be a very bad idea," she continued, her tone dropping, "to involve yourself in matters that don't concern you." Angela swallowed. "I understand." Another pause. Then, Vanessa laughed softly. "You understand?" she repeated. "Oh, no. I don't think you do." The room felt smaller now, heavier. "You people always think you can just drift into places you don't belong," Vanessa said, her voice sharper now. "Like you're invisible. Like no one sees what you're really doing." Angela's hands clenched slightly at her sides, but she didn't move, didn't argue, didn't give Vanessa what she wanted. "I'm just here to do my job," Angela said quietly. Vanessa's eyes flashed. "That's exactly the problem," she snapped. Before Angela could react, Vanessa's hand moved, fast. A sharp crack echoed through the room. Angela's head turned slightly from the impact. The sound lingered, then silence. Angela didn't fall, didn't step back. She stood there, still, her cheek burning, her eyes steady. Vanessa stared at her, breathing slightly heavier now. "Get out," she said. Angela blinked. "I said get out," Vanessa repeated, louder. "You're done here." The words landed harder than the slap. Angela felt something inside her drop. Not break, not shatter. Just fall. She looked toward the staircase, toward Daniel's room, then back at Vanessa. "My things," she began. "You don't have any things," Vanessa cut in. "Everything you brought into this house belongs to this house." Angela's throat tightened, but she nodded. Once, then turned, step by step toward the door. No shouting, no tears, just quiet, heavy, real. Outside, the sky had already darkened. Rain began to fall, slow at first, then heavier. Angela stepped out into it without hesitation. The gate closed behind her with a low, final sound. She stood there for a moment, just standing, from the rain soaking through her clothes, her hair, her skin. Cold, sharp, but grounding. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from everything she hadn't said, everything she had held back. Angela looked up at the house, lights glowing warm behind the windows. It looked beautiful from the outside. Perfect. Like nothing inside could ever go wrong. She knew better now. A car passed in the distance. Water pooled along the curb. The city moved on, like it always did. Angela pulled her arms around herself and started walking. Down the long driveway, out into the night. But halfway to the gate, she stopped, turned back. Just for a second. Her eyes moved to the second floor. To the window she knew was his. She couldn't see him, but she felt it. That connection, that understanding. Then she whispered, but barely audible through the rain, "I'm still here." And then she turned and walked away. Inside the house, Daniel sat in silence, but his hands, for the first time, closed into fists beneath the blanket. The test had gone too far, and something inside him was about to break. The rain didn't stop that night. It poured against the windows of the Carter estate, streaking the glass in long, restless lines. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and steady, like something waiting to be heard. Inside, everything was quiet again. Too quiet. Daniel sat alone in the dim glow of a bedside lamp. The room felt larger now, emptier. The chair beside him, where Angela had sat just hours before, remained untouched, still, vacant. He stared at it longer than he meant to. Then slowly, beneath the blanket, his fingers moved, and this time, not by accident. His hand curled slightly, then released. A breath left his chest, controlled, measured, but no longer weak. He shifted his leg, just a fraction, then stopped immediately, as if the movement itself carried risk. Because it did. The act wasn't just for Vanessa. It was for everyone. Every staff member, every visitor, every camera. He had spent days building this illusion, but now, the cost was becoming clear. Angela was gone, and the house felt colder because of it. Downstairs, Vanessa's laughter echoed faintly. Daniel's eyes darkened. He knew that sound. Careless, unbothered, free. As if nothing had happened. As if someone hadn't just been thrown out into the storm. As if loyalty didn't matter. He closed his eyes, just for a moment, then opened them again. Sharp, focused, watching. The next morning came gray and heavy. The storm had passed, but the air still held its weight. In South Central, Angela stood outside a small corner bakery, waiting for the owner to unlock the door. Her clothes were clean, but worn. Her hair tied back neatly, despite the dampness that still lingered from the night before. She hadn't slept much, but she showed up anyway. Because that's what she did. She carried a small paper bag in her hand again. Same as before. Inside. Simple breakfast. Warm. Homemade. She looked down at it for a moment, then toward the street. Cars passed. People moved. Life continued. Angela took a breath, then walked. Not toward the bus stop. Not toward home. But back. To the mansion. She didn't ring the front gate. Didn't step inside. Instead, she walked around the side, toward the service entrance, where the old security guard, Mr. Lewis, stood. He looked up as she approached. "Angela?" he said, surprised. "Thought, I know," she said gently. "I just wanted to drop this off." She held out the bag. Mr. Lewis hesitated, then took it. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I won't stay," she replied. "Just, please make sure he gets it." Mr. Lewis studied her face, then nodded slowly. "I will." Angela gave a small smile. "Thank you." She turned and left. No hesitation, no expectation. Just done. Back inside, the house moved as usual. Staff rotated in and out. Vanessa spoke on calls. Mark arrived before noon. Everything continued. Except one thing. Daniel hadn't eaten. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't moved. But when Mr. Lewis entered the room quietly and placed the paper bag on the side table. Something changed. Daniel's eyes shifted, locked onto it. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't react. Then slowly, his hand slid out from beneath the blanket. Careful, controlled. He reached for the bag. His fingers brushed the edge, then closed around it. He opened it. The faint smell of warm biscuits filled the air. Simple, familiar, real. Inside, a small folded note. He unfolded it. Just 2 words. For you. No name. No explanation. He didn't need one. Daniel sat there in silence, the weight of it settling deeper than anything else had. Because she didn't have to come back. She didn't have to care. She didn't have to give anything. But she did. Anyway. Downstairs, Vanessa's voice echoed again, sharper now. "Oh, we're moving forward today," she said. "No delays." Mark nodded. "Good," he replied. "The lawyer's ready." Their voices faded as they moved toward the office. But Daniel heard enough. He always did. He folded the note carefully, set it beside him, then looked toward the door. His jaw tightened, because now, this wasn't just a test anymore. It was a choice, and someone else had already made theirs. Across the city, Angela stood in a small community kitchen, tying an apron around her waist. Steam rose from large pots. The smell of soup filled the air. A line of people waited outside. Some quiet, some tired, all hungry. Angela moved through the space with ease, familiar, purposeful. She handed out bowls, smiled, listened. When an older man dropped his spoon, she bent down and picked it up without hesitation. But when a child started to cry, she knelt beside him and spoke softly until he calmed. No cameras, no audience, no reward. Just kindness. The kind that didn't stop just because someone else had. A volunteer beside her leaned over. "You okay?" she asked. Angela nodded. "I will be." She kept working, kept giving, because that's who she was. Back at the mansion, Daniel sat alone. The untouched tray of catered food sat cold on the table, but the empty paper bag, that was different. That meant something. His fingers curled again, stronger this time, more certain. The silence in the room felt different now. Not empty, not powerless, but waiting. Because somewhere beyond those walls, someone had chosen to stay kind, even after being pushed away. And inside that mansion, Daniel Carter was no longer just watching. Well, he was deciding what came next, and who deserved to stand beside him when it did. The city didn't wait for anyone. Not for heartbreak, not for betrayal, not for quiet acts no one saw. By late afternoon, the community kitchen buzzed with a different kind of energy. Steam rose from metal pots, curling into the fluorescent lights overhead. The sound of ladles hitting the sides of containers echoed softly, blending with the murmur of voices, people trading stories, worries, small pieces of their day. Angela moved through it all like she belonged there, because she did. "Hot soup, careful now," she said gently, handing a bowl to an elderly man with trembling hands. "Thank you, baby," he murmured, his voice worn but grateful. Angela smiled. Of course. She didn't rush, didn't look past people. She saw them, one by one. That was the difference. At the far end of the line, a young boy stood with his mother, his sneakers worn at the edges, his eyes wide and watchful. When Angela handed him a small cup of juice, he looked up at her. "Why are you always nice?" he asked. The question was simple, but it lingered. Angela paused, just for a second, Then she crouched down slightly to meet his eyes. "Because somebody should be," she said softly. The boy nodded, like that answer made sense. Maybe it did. Angela stood back up, but her smile faded just a little. Because kindness didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere. From things she didn't talk about. From nights like the one before. From years of being overlooked. From moments when no one had chosen her. She turned back to the line, continuing her work, but her mind somewhere else, and back in that mansion, back in that room, back to the moment she had seen it. 3 days ago, the first night Daniel had returned from the hospital. The house had been quiet then, too, still adjusting, still pretending. Angela had entered the room to clean. Routine. Simple. She thought he was asleep. She always did. But that night, something was different. She remembered the way the curtain had shifted slightly from the breeze, the way the light fell across the floor, and then she saw it. A movement. Small. Controlled. His foot. Just a slight adjustment. But enough. Angela had frozen where she stood. Her breath caught. Not in fear. In realization. She didn't speak. Didn't step closer. She simply watched. Daniel's eyes had been open. Not wide. Not startled. Just aware. Focused on something in his hand. Oh, a photograph. Vanessa. He had stared at it for a long moment. Then his expression changed. Not anger. Not pain. Something deeper. Something calculating. That was the moment Angela understood. This wasn't recovery. This wasn't hope. This was a choice. A decision. A test. And she had said nothing. Not to anyone. Not even to him. Because something in her told her this wasn't her truth to expose. It was his to reveal. Back in the present, Angela stirred a pot slowly, the memory settling quietly inside her. She hadn't told him she knew, not fully, not directly, only enough to let him understand. He wasn't alone. A volunteer brushed past her. "You good?" he asked. Angela nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." He smiled. "Dangerous thing." She gave a small laugh. "Sometimes." But her thoughts stayed heavy, because now things were moving faster. Vanessa's voice, Mark's plan, the documents. It wasn't just a test anymore. It was a trap. And Daniel was standing right in the middle of it. Across town, inside the mansion, that trap was tightening. Vanessa paced slowly across the office, heels tapping against the floor with precise rhythm. Mark sat across from her, flipping through a set of papers. "This is everything," he said. "Once he signs, it's done." Vanessa stopped. "And if he hesitates?" Mark didn't look up. "He won't." A pause, then, "We make sure of it." Upstairs, Daniel sat in silence. But his mind was no longer still. He had heard enough, seen enough, felt enough. The paper bag from earlier sat empty beside him, the note folded neatly, his fingers brushed over it once more. "For you." Such simple words. But they carried weight. Because she knew. Not everything. But enough. And she chose to stay. Not in the house, not in the role, but in spirit, in action, in truth. Daniel leaned forward slightly, just enough to feel the strain, to feel the reality beneath the act. Because the act was ending soon. He could feel it. The timing, the pressure, the moment approaching. But there was something else now, something he hadn't expected. Trust. Not in the system. Not in the people around him, but in one person, Angela. Because she had seen the truth and didn't use it, didn't trade it, didn't expose it. She protected it. That mattered, more than anything else. Back at the community kitchen, the line had thinned. The sun dipped lower, casting orange light through the dusty windows. While Angela wiped down the counter slowly, her hands moving in rhythm. A quiet moment. Finally. She leaned against the edge, exhaling softly, then reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked, old, but working. She stared at it for a long moment, then typed a message. Not to Daniel. She couldn't. Not directly. Instead, she sent it to Mr. Lewis. Please make sure he's okay tonight. She hesitated, then added, and tell him to be careful who he trusts. She hit send, slipped the phone back into her pocket, and looked out the window. The city stretched out before her, loud, messy, real, but somewhere beyond that, a mansion stood on a hill, full of glass, full of secrets, full of people who thought they were in control. Angela's eyes softened, because she knew something they didn't. But the truth didn't belong to them. It never had. And when it finally came out, everything would change. Not just for Daniel, but for all of them. And when that moment came, only one question would matter. Who had stayed real, when it would have been easier not to? Morning arrived with a sharp kind of silence. Not peaceful, not calm, tense, like the air itself was holding its breath. Inside the Carter estate, everything had been prepared. The long oak table in the private office was polished to a mirror shine. Documents were laid out in perfect alignment, each page clipped neatly, each line waiting for a signature. Vanessa stood by the window, arms crossed, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. She wore white today, clean, sharp, controlled. Mark stood near the table, flipping through the final pages once more. This is it, he said quietly. Once he signs, everything transfers. No contest. Vanessa didn't turn. He will sign, she replied. Not hope, not doubt, certainty. Behind them, a man adjusted his tie nervously. Mr. Halpern, the lawyer. He cleared his throat. I just want to remind you, he said carefully, that everything must appear voluntary. If there's any sign of pressure, there won't be. Vanessa cut in smoothly. Mark smirked. Trust us. Upstairs, Daniel sat in the same position, the same stillness, the same illusion. But inside, nothing was the same. He had already made his decision. His eyes moved toward the door. He heard the footsteps. 3 sets, approaching, measured, certain. The door opened. Vanessa entered first, then Mark, then the lawyer. The room filled quickly, but something felt off, because one presence was missing. Angela. Daniel's gaze flickered for just a moment, then stilled again. Vanessa stepped closer, her voice soft, almost gentle. Good morning, Daniel, she said. No response. She smiled faintly. We're just here to take care of a few things, she continued. Nothing complicated. Mark pulled out a chair and sat, placing the documents neatly in front of him. Everything is ready, he said. The lawyer stepped forward, holding a pen. Mr. Carter, he began, his tone professional but cautious. These documents will allow Mrs. Carter to manage your assets and business interests on your behalf, given your current condition. He placed the pen on the table. All we need is your signature. The room went quiet, heavy, waiting. And Daniel's eyes moved slowly toward the papers, then to Vanessa, then to Mark. Each face, each expression, each truth. Vanessa stepped closer, leaning slightly toward him. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'll take care of everything." Her hand moved gently toward his, guiding, pressing, control disguised as care. Daniel let his hand rest where she placed it, still, unresisting. Mark leaned back, watching, satisfied. This was it. The end. The moment everything changed. Vanessa lowered her voice further. "Just sign, Daniel," she said softly, "and this all goes away." The pen touched his fingers. The lawyer adjusted the paper. The room held its breath. And then, Daniel moved. Not slightly, not subtly, completely. His hand closed firmly around the pen. Strong, steady, real. Vanessa froze. Mark's smile faltered. The lawyer blinked. Daniel lifted his hand and placed the pen down. Deliberately. Then, he looked up, fully, clearly, present. "This all goes away," Daniel said. His voice, strong, calm, unmistakably clear. Vanessa stepped back, her face drained of color. "No," she whispered. Mark stood abruptly. "What?" Daniel pushed himself forward. Then, he stood. The movement wasn't rushed, wasn't dramatic. It was controlled, certain, like something that had always been there, just hidden. Vanessa stumbled backward. "That's not possible," she said, her voice shaking. You can't." Daniel straightened, looking at her, not with anger, not with rage, but with clarity. "I can," he said simply. The room felt smaller now, the illusion shattered. Mark stepped forward, his voice rising. "This is a trick," he snapped. You're pretending." Daniel turned to him. "No," he said. "I was pretending before." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. The lawyer took a step back. "I think I should, stay," Daniel said firmly. The man froze. Vanessa shook her head, backing away slowly. "You lied," she whispered. "You lied to me." Daniel's expression didn't change. "I needed the truth," he replied. Mark laughed sharply. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Even if you're not paralyzed, it doesn't change anything. We still—" Daniel reached into the side of the chair, pulled out a small device, pressed a button. A soft click echoed in the room. Then, voices, recorded, clear. "Once it's signed, we own it all." Vanessa's voice, followed by Mark's. "He doesn't have a choice." The sound filled the space, undeniable, unavoidable. Vanessa's breath caught, as Mark's face tightened. Daniel lowered the device slowly. "I've been recording everything," he said. The truth settled over them like weight. "You planned this," Daniel continued. "Every word, every move." Vanessa shook her head again, panic creeping into her voice. No, that's not enough," Daniel said. Not loud, but final. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Firm, official. The door opened again. 2 officers stepped inside, followed by Mr. Lewis. Vanessa turned sharply. "What is this?" she demanded. Daniel didn't look at her. "I believe you already know," he said. Mark stepped back. "This is insane," he muttered. "You can't—" "You're done," Daniel replied. The officers moved forward, calm, professional. Vanessa's voice broke. You wouldn't do this to me, she said, almost pleading now. Well, Daniel finally looked at her. And this time, there was no warmth, no hesitation. You did it to yourself. The words landed, final, irreversible. As the officers guided them away, Vanessa's voice faded into the distance. Mark's protests followed. Then silence. The room emptied. The tension lifted. And Daniel stood there, alone, but not the same, because something had ended, and something else had just begun. His eyes moved toward the doorway, as if expecting someone, as if hoping. Because out of everyone, only one person had stayed real, and she wasn't there to see this. Not yet. The mansion felt different after they were gone. Not quieter, not emptier, just honest. For the first time since the accident, nothing in the Carter estate was pretending to be something it wasn't. And the polished floors were still there, the high ceilings, the expensive silence, but the illusion had cracked, and it wouldn't be rebuilt. Daniel stood in the center of the office, the echo of footsteps fading down the hallway as the officers escorted Vanessa and Mark out of his life, out of his home, out of everything they had tried to take. Mr. Lewis remained by the door, hands folded, unsure whether to speak. You did the right thing, sir, he said quietly. Daniel nodded once. I know. But his voice didn't carry victory. It carried weight. Because truth didn't always feel like relief. Sometimes it felt like loss. The lawyer had already left. The documents remained untouched on the table. Pages slightly shifted from where everything had changed. Daniel walked over slowly, not out of habit, out of necessity, and he placed his hand on the edge of the table, steady, grounded, real. Then he gathered the papers, folded them once, and set them aside. Finished. Behind him, sunlight poured through the windows, brighter now, clearer. The storm from the night before had washed something away. Or maybe it had revealed what had always been there. Downstairs, staff whispered quietly among themselves. The news had traveled fast, but no one spoke too loudly. The house was still adjusting to its new reality. No more Vanessa. No more Mark. Just truth and uncertainty. Daniel moved through the halls slowly, each step deliberate, each movement no longer hidden. For days, he had lived in silence, watched, waited, measured. Now, there was nothing left to hide. He passed the living room, the staircase, the kitchen, and every space felt familiar and completely different. Because one person was missing, not just physically, but in presence, in energy, in meaning. Angela. He stopped at the side entrance, the same place where she had stood countless times, where she had entered quietly, left quietly, given more than anyone ever asked of her. He looked at the door, then beyond it, toward the city. Because that's where she was now, not waiting, not expecting, just living, the way she always had, without needing recognition, without needing permission. Daniel stepped outside. The air was crisp, clean. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a pale blue stretched wide above the hills. For the first time in days, he took a full breath. No wait, no act, just real. Where are you going, sir? Mr. Lewis asked from behind him. Yet Daniel didn't turn. To find someone, he said. The drive into the city felt longer than usual. Or maybe it just felt different. The world outside the gates didn't look polished, didn't shine the same way. But it felt alive. Daniel passed rows of buildings, small shops, crowded streets. People moved quickly, focused on their own lives, their own struggles. No one noticed the man in the car. No one cared who he was. And for the first time, that didn't bother him, because status meant nothing without truth, and he had finally seen both. When he arrived at the community kitchen, he didn't park in front, didn't step out immediately. He sat there for a moment, watching. Through the window he could see her, Angela, moving between tables, serving, helping, smiling, the same way she had in his home, not the same way she had in that room, the same way she had in the storm. Nothing had changed, because nothing needed to. Daniel stepped out of the car, closed the door quietly, then walked toward the entrance. No security, no announcement, no presence beyond himself. Inside, the room buzzed with quiet energy, the smell of food, the sound of conversation, the weight of real life. Angela stood near the counter, handing a bowl to a man seated at the edge. "Careful, it's hot," she said gently. The man nodded, grateful. Daniel didn't approach her immediately. Instead, he stepped into line, behind others, waiting, not as a billionaire, not as someone above the moment, just another person. Angela moved down the line, focused, present. Then, she saw him. Not at first, not fully, just a glance, then a second look, and everything slowed. Her hands paused mid-motion. The room faded slightly around her. Because he was standing there, not in a chair, not still, not silent. Standing. Looking at her. Angela's breath caught. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stared. Daniel stepped forward when it was his turn. The space between them felt different now. Not employer and staff, not rich and poor. Just two people who had seen each other clearly. "You're okay," she said softly. It wasn't a question. It was realization. Daniel nodded. "I am." A pause. Heavy. Full. Angela looked at him again. Really looked. Then back down at her hands. Then back up. "You knew," she said. Not accusing, not surprised. Just confirming. Daniel met her gaze. "I needed to know who was real," he replied. Angela nodded slowly. "And you found out." Another pause, then, "Yes," he said. The noise of the room returned. Voices. Movement. Life continuing around them. But something in that moment stayed still. Because truth had finally reached the light, and nothing could take it back. Daniel stepped aside, allowing the next person forward. But he didn't leave. Not yet. Because there was still something left to say. And this time, he wasn't going to wait. Daniel stepped out of line. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just enough to close the distance between them. Angela was still standing behind the counter, her hands resting lightly on the edge, as if she needed something steady to hold onto. The room continued moving around them. Voices, footsteps, the quiet rhythm of people being served. But between the two of them, everything slowed again. Daniel spoke first. "I came to say thank you." Simple words, but they carried weight. Angela let out a small breath, almost a laugh, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I do," Daniel replied. His voice wasn't commanding, wasn't distant. It was human. "I didn't say anything because I expected something back," Angela added, glancing down briefly. "I just Did what felt right. Daniel nodded. I know, he said. That was the point. That was everything. A volunteer passed between them, placing fresh trays on the counter. The moment stretched, but didn't break. Daniel looked around the room, at the chipped paint on the walls, at the folding chairs, at the people sitting quietly, eating what little they had. Then back at Angela. You kept showing up, he said. Even after everything. Angela shrugged slightly. People still need help, she said. That doesn't stop just because something else goes wrong. Daniel studied her for a moment. Not the surface, not the role, but the truth underneath. You knew, he said. Angela met his eyes. I had a feeling, she replied, that I wasn't paralyzed. She nodded once. For a while. Daniel let that settle. And you didn't say anything. Angela shook her head. That wasn't my place. A pause. Then she added softer. You were looking for something. Daniel's expression shifted slightly. And I didn't want to take that away from you. The honesty in her voice didn't ask for approval, didn't ask for recognition. It simply existed. And Daniel felt it. Fully. Shus, I've spent my whole life around people who needed something from me, he said slowly. Money, access, power. Angela didn't respond. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. But you didn't, he continued. Even when you had every reason to. Angela's fingers traced lightly along the edge of the counter. I've had enough taken from me, she said quietly. I don't need to take from anyone else. The words landed gently, but they stayed, because they were real. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a small envelope. Plain, unmarked. He placed it on the counter. Angela looked down at it, then back at him. I'm not taking money, she said immediately. Her voice wasn't defensive, just firm. Daniel shook his head. It's not that. She hesitated, then slowly picked it up and opened it. Inside. A document. She read the first line, then the second. Her eyes widened slightly. This is, she began, her voice trailing. Daniel nodded. A foundation, he said, focused on communities like this, food programs, housing support, education access. Angela looked back at the paper, then at him. You're giving this to me? She asked. I'm asking you to run it, Daniel corrected. The distinction mattered. A lot. Angela blinked. I don't have that kind of experience, she said. You have exactly the kind of experience it needs, Daniel replied. He gestured lightly around the room. You understand this place, these people, what they actually need, not what looks good on paper. Angela's grip on the document tightened slightly. That's different from running something like this, she said. Maybe, Daniel said. But everything else can be learned. A pause, then. What can't be learned is what you already have. Angela looked at him, really looked, and for the first time since he had walked in. She didn't see a billionaire. She saw the man who had sat in silence, who had listened, who had watched, who had chosen. I don't want to be a project, she said carefully. You're not, Daniel replied immediately. You're the reason this exists. Silence. Not uncomfortable, not heavy, just real. Angela glanced around the room again, at the people, at the work, at the place that had always been hers in a quiet, invisible way, then back at the paper in her hands. This doesn't mean I leave here, she said. Daniel shook his head. It means you expand it. That landed differently. Angela exhaled slowly, and her shoulders relaxed just a little. You really trust me with this? She asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. I trust what I saw, he said. And I trust what you did when you thought no one was watching. The words echoed something deeper, something that had started all of this. Angela looked down at the paper one more time, then closed it gently. I'll think about it, she said. Daniel nodded. That's all I'm asking. Another pause, then. Thank you, he added again. This time, it felt different. Not formal, not necessary, but meant. Angela gave a small nod. You're welcome. Around them, the room continued. Bowls filled, chairs scraped softly against the floor. Life moved forward. But something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, in the kind of way that stayed. Daniel stepped back, while not leaving yet, but giving space to, because for the first time, this wasn't about control, or testing, or proving anything. It was about building something real, together, and that was a different kind of wealth, and that was a different kind of wealth. Not money, not power, not control, but something rarer, the kind of wealth that shows up when no one is watching. So now I want to ask you something simple. If you were in Angela's place, would you have stayed? Type 1 if you would stay loyal. Type 0 if you would walk away. No long comments. Just one number. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that kindness still matters in this world, hit that subscribe button and stay with us, because the next story might just change the way you see people too.